Work Wellness Institute is transforming research into workplace performance and health. As an organization, we function throughout the complete cycle of turning research into practice, mobilizing knowledge as a research institute, community partner, funder, and educational provider. Our mission of creating safe, healthy, and inclusive workplaces for all is our driving motivation. Learning is a lifelong journey to adapt to the forever changing needs of the workplace. Whether you are a leader, a professional, an academic, or a student, we provide high-quality resources that are evidence-based, topical, and relevant to all industries. Choose the Work Wellness Institute as your learning journey partner and become a member to gain full access to our diverse knowledge mobilization programming, including lectures on demand, e-curriculum, 3 distinct certification opportunities, and more. Continue to learn and connect with the Work Wellness Institute and see how we can support transforming research into performance and health for your workplace.
Hello, I will welcome everyone in. I know that there is a delay with Zoom as everybody kind of gets let into the room, so we're just going to allow for that. So please bear with us for a few moments here, but we'll be sure to keep things going and on time. So I can see the numbers are climbing, so I'll just allow that for a few more seconds and then we'll get started in today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining as well as your patience today. Okay, just to be mindful of time, we always want to respect that, and we are so appreciative of everyone joining us today. So a good morning, a good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you may be joining us today. We welcome everyone, and again, thank you so much for joining us in today's webinar on tips and advice for workplaces to engage employees of all ages. My name is Elizabeth White, and I'm the team lead of Learning and Development with the Work Wellness Institute. And I'm here to just help moderate and host in today's session. I do want to start by acknowledging that I have the privilege to live and work on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. This webinar is made possible through the support of our funders, partners, as well as memberships to the Work Wellness Institute. And of course, we want to thank our advisory committees, as well as our speakers who contribute to this webinar series. Okay, well, thank you so much for indulging in those few moments of housekeeping. I'm more than happy to be moving into the main event today. So we are very excited to have Anna van Renen with us today. And Anna joined the ILC, the UK's leading authority on the impact of longevity on society in 2023. She works in health and social research, and current projects include preventative healthcare, vaccination, and continuous education in older adults. Anna is from the UK but lived and studied in South Africa for 10 years. Aside from working at the ILC, she is still conducting research through the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg on access to pediatric healthcare for migrants. Her passion lies in how policy can promote equitable and inclusive access to social and healthcare services and how inequalities can be addressed to ensure institutions provide longevity-based healthcare and social services to everyone. So thank you so much, Anna, for being with us today, and I'm more than happy to pass things over to you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you to everyone who's joined to listen to me. It's really great to be able to be here today to talk about tips and advice for engaging employees of all ages. So today's presentation is based off of 2 pieces of work. So the first one was the ILC's Work for Tomorrow project. This was a competition that we ran to identify innovations that respond best to an aging workforce. So we looked at applications from all over the world, and then we also had judges from all over the world too. And then the second piece of work is actually currently unpublished. So this is my first time presenting it. You guys are the first to hear about it, but this is a piece of work about lifelong learning, specifically looking at how we can encourage working age adults to engage in continuous education and upskilling and reskilling so that people who do want to work for longer can work for longer and stay relevant in the workforce. So I'll just start off with why we need to engage. So the workforce is aging. In June 2022 in the UK, there were over 1.4 million people aged over 65 that were still in employment. So that's 12% of the whole over 65 population. And 2/3 of retired adults in the UK intend to carry on working in some form. The way that we work is also changing. So we're moving away from these linear career paths. We're seeing more career switching. We've got automation and artificial intelligence that are becoming more and more common across all industries. Remote working and flexible working is also becoming more common. And other aspects like the gig economy is becoming a lot bigger. So all of this is changing the way that we work. So just a quick break here to ask, how many generations are currently represented at your workplace? Okay, so it looks like the majority of people have selected that more than 3 generations are present in their workplace at the moment. Some people have 2, some people have 3, no one has 1. So that's very interesting. So the reason I asked this is because for the first time ever, we have 5 generations in the workforce. So we've got Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, and the silent generation all together. So we have such a broad range of ages and people in the workforce for the first time. But despite this, engagement is still quite a challenge. So in Europe, only about 13% of employees are actively engaged in work. In North America, so Canada and the US, this is higher at 31%. But in this region, there's a higher number of actively disengaged employees as well, as opposed to just not engaged. So we can definitely see that more employees need engagement. Okay, so let's talk about why we need to engage, what good comes from it. So we've got so many different generations and ages in the workforce, so we have this huge diversity of perspectives. There's a lot of experiences, knowledge, which can all lead to more innovation. We also get improved knowledge transfer and retention when we engage. So there's areas that both younger and older workers can bring different values to, and sharing these different understandings and levels of knowledge benefits everyone. Not only this, but when we can share knowledge, especially from older employees that might be nearing retirement, this means that any knowledge that's really important to your organization or your company is passed on to current employees and is retained within your organization. We also get improved productivity and performance when we engage employees better. So engaged employees are more likely to be motivated and productive and committed to their work because they feel valued and recognized for what they do. We also have increased employee retention. So when people are engaged and happy with where they are more likely to stay in companies. We can retain talent, but also it reduces any sort of employee turnover costs. When people aren't engaged, they're more likely to look for other employment opportunities, which can lead to increased recruitment and training expenses. And then, as I said, the way that we work is changing. So if we can engage employees successfully, we can adapt to this changing working life. And also that ensures that your organization would stay competitive within the market at the moment. Okay, there's also some challenges when it comes to engaging employees across ages. So the first one is ageism. Ageism is the most accepted and most common form of discrimination in the world. So about 50% of people all over the world have some form of ageist attitude or perspectives. For those who are over the age of 50 at work, 62% of them have experienced ageism. But at the same time, there's been new research that's actually shown that younger people between the ages of 18 and 30 are 13% more likely to experience ageism than those over 50. So we can see this as an issue on both ends of the spectrum. We've also got differing priorities, which can be a challenge. Based on age, employees can have differing priorities when it comes to work. So in the UK, people who are between the ages of 25 and 40 are more likely to prioritize comfort and a feeling of being appreciated within their workplace. So they're looking for recognition, they're looking for trust, they're looking for a lack of micromanagement and the freedom to just do what they want to do, make decisions. But for those over the age of 40, the priorities change to focus more on work-life balance, flexibility in hours, and also a cohesiveness within their work environment. So we have to try and marry all of these differing priorities at the same time. There can also be a perceived lack of shared values. This is obviously more of a subjective one, but it does pop up in working environments. So employees of different ages aren't always looking for the same things from work. Often this is a perceived thing as opposed to an actual thing, but it's still a challenge. So younger employees are often seen as using whatever job they're in as a stepping stone for the next point in their career and treated as though they might not stay there as long. Whereas on the other hand, older employees are sometimes seen as not trying really hard because they're just waiting out work until they could reach retirement and get their pension. So we have that perceived lack of sort of shared values and lack of commitment perhaps to a company. And then the last one is health as we age. So I don't really think there's ever an age where you're too old to work, but we know that as we age, it's likely that we'll run into some more health issues which may impact our work. So in the UK, 47% of workers over the age of 55 are impacted by arthritis, and 44% are impacted by hypertension. And then with women, a third of all women experience really severe menopause symptoms. So all of these are sort of health challenges that will pop up as we have aging employees. So just a quick poll break. To what extent is your organization currently affected by challenges stemming from intergenerational differences? Okay, cool. So we've got a bit more of a mixture here, but either way, there's some impact. So very little, somewhat affected, or very affected. I see somewhat affected as the most common answer. And this makes sense. You know, we do have differences. We're all different people, we're all different ages, etc., etc. It makes sense. So it's just about how we can mitigate and marry those differences instead of sort of trying to avoid them altogether. Okay. So today's tips are going to be based around a few sort of broader topics. So the first one is getting started. The next one is maintaining health for your employees. The third one is building knowledge, skills, and competence. The next one is addressing discrimination. And then finally, adapting your workplace. So the first thing getting started is knowing your numbers. It sounds really obvious, but you have to have data on your employee age profiles. Without it, you can't understand the needs of your employees, you can't understand the needs of your organization. So that would be the absolute first thing to get done. The next thing to do would be to switch up your review style. So only 1 in 3 employers in North America believe that their employees are fairly evaluated. We have annual and semi-annual reviews with line managers, and they can be really useful. We can use them to identify strengths, we can set goals, identify areas for improvement, you can get feedback from them, but they're not always the most comprehensive option we can take, and they're not always the most objective either. So other options for reviews can give us a more sort of holistic, personalized approach in our career support and development. For example, a 360 review. So these types of reviews involve feedback from everyone close to an employee. So that sort of 360 circle. So they get feedback from managers, co-workers, themselves, they do self-assessments, customers if you work with customers. And in some companies, they even get feedback from sort of friends and family outside of work to include in their review. So this style of review, it benefits individuals and organizations. 360 reviews offer more comprehensive feedback, which can increase self-awareness. It also reduces bias because you've got more than one person sort of giving that feedback. And then it can also create stronger relationships. When you have to go out and ask someone for feedback, it forces that communication, which can then build some trust and rapport and encourage more communication within your organization. And it also can increase accountability. People are aware that their performance is being reviewed by multiple actors, so they're more motivated to work harder. The next option for sort of different types of reviews is a skills-based review. This also limits bias and sort of personal perceptions of performance by identifying skills gaps and discussing future development with employees. So skills-based reviews identify specific skills related to each role and encourage self-assessment and managerial assessment. The next step of this isn't really what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, but it's more of just a collaboration of, okay, these are my skills now. What do you do in the future to develop more? So it emphasizes what's important to the organization by what skills they might need, but also encourages employees to improve themselves. So we get better motivation and we get higher retention because you can feel like your skills are truly valued. The next option is reviews across the life course. So the first one is sort of an early career review. So this is often used for younger employees, but it can be used for employees of any age as long as they're sort of earlier in the career path or the career field. So if we identify strengths and weaknesses early for employees, this means that we can offer better development programs later on. And it also sets clear expectations for the employee as to what's expected of them and what they will be provided in terms of training. Then the next option is a midlife career review. This is possibly the most important, in my opinion, the most important type of review that company could offer. It's a personalized review. It can be conducted at work. You could do it yourself. It could be for unemployed individuals as well. But it looks at your entire life in context of yourself, but with your career included as well. So it includes self-reflection, assessing goals, achievements, skills, but then it also looks at work-life balance, what your values are, what your health is looking like, what your financial planning is looking like, if you want to explore new opportunities. And it can really improve your well-being inside and outside of work. This type of review also empowers people to create better decisions about their career and their future as well. So this one is really, really important when it comes to guiding employees. Okay, the next tip in getting started is to ask, not assume. So 83% of employees in the UK feel that their voices aren't fairly heard. Employees know themselves best, So it's really important to just ask, ensure that line managers are speaking to their direct reportees about their needs, but also employ some anonymous feedback approaches to really allow people to contribute without fear of sort of backlash or anything like that. All of these tips that I've given and will give are really important, but it's remembering that everyone's different as well. So a really, really good thing is to just check in and see if things would suit them, what they want, what they need. And then people will feel more valued because they can engage with their work environment. The other part of this is that when people do share their feelings, sometimes they feel like it's ignored. So 60% of employees in the UK feel that their opinions are ignored. So after you ask, do something with the information. Don't just ask and then do nothing. The last tip of getting started is to build your team. So around half of all employees in the UK don't feel connected to their co-workers, and they don't feel a sense of belonging in their workplace. So a good relationship among co-workers will build camaraderie, it will improve productivity, it would improve employee retention as well. So that's really, really important aspect when it comes to engaging employees. And this is even more key amongst Gen Z workers. Whilst across the whole UK, it was half of all employees that didn't feel connected. This was greatly increased when it comes to people of Gen Z age. So there's probably a few reasons for that. You know, it might be earlier in the workforce, it might be the impact of COVID and online working and online learning that had on Gen Z, but they are feeling more left out and less connected to their workplace. So it's really important that we build a team, not necessarily like building a family, because sometimes that attitude can be a bit toxic within the workplace, but just building a team, making friends at work is really important. So we can be respectful, communicate, but outside of like normal work things, also just having lunch together, going to the pub after work, that's a very British thing. I don't know if you do that in Canada as well. And then organizing team outings, that kind of thing is as important as those sort of more formal connections that you have through meetings when it comes to building a team. Okay, the next section of steps is about health. So as I said in my introduction, as we get older, we can run into some health issues that impacts our work, but across any age, we can also run into health issues that impact work. So this is really important for anyone. When we have health initiatives in work, this actually improves employees' health and their productivity within the workplace. So ill health costs the UK 180 billion a year in lost working days. So this is a really, really big issue that can be mitigated. People do want to stay in work, they want help. So there's tools that we can use to do this. There's occupational health guides, which are really important to engaging all employees. They'll feel more taken care of, they're more likely to stay in companies and then perform better. Companies that support occupational health generally have better reputations. And also when we have occupational health services in place, cost of injuries and illnesses can be more mitigated. One key thing with occupational health is that we need to remember that some health issues aren't always visible and some aren't always comfortable to speak about. So if occupational health services can be offered to everyone without question, it's really important that that is implemented. The other option is looking for specific tools to use, like the Empowerment Passport. So this is an example of the Empowerment Passport. This is a digital tool we have in the UK. It looks at 4 domains, so physical, social, intellectual, and emotional. And you can pick which ones you want to fill in. You don't have to fill them all in. And when you fill in the passport, you answer prompts and phrases, and it creates content for you, which you can then share with your employer. So in this example, this person suffers from anxiety and depression. So they've chosen to focus on the social and emotional adjustments only. So they've outlined some things they need help with. They need pace working in a team. They need reassurance. They need support. But they've also indicated things that they're working on that they know works for them. So they've got this red, amber, green system here. They've detailed what they're doing to help themselves as well. So this is a really important document that can be used in work to help people who might be struggling with health just stay in work longer. The other part of maintaining health is just promoting health. So the first thing about this is thinking about what works best in your line of work, because this is definitely more adaptable. In manual labor work, this could be something along the lines of sort of taking more breaks or balancing out more physically strenuous work. In an office building, this might literally be like encouraging people to get up away from the computer or get eye tests because they're staring at a screen all day, that kind of thing. We also don't just need to adapt after someone gets sick. It's really good to be preemptive with our sort of healthcare and health provision. So educating is a really good way of sort of promoting wellness. It shows employees that they're important. Lifestyle education, looking at things like nutrition or smoking cessation, can be really useful in a workplace. Actual preventative health is also really important. So in America, every $1 invested in worksite wellness saves an average of $3.27 in healthcare costs. So this sort of preventative health refers to maybe having vaccination drives at work during flu season to prevent your employees from getting flu, sort of a free or discounted gym membership. Cycling to work schemes is a big thing in London, and that really sort of encourages people to be healthy. You know, when companies show that they support health and can mitigate preventable illnesses, this increases morale and productivity, and as we see, reduces our illness costs as well. The last part of this is building mental health into your work education, work prevention programs, offering free counseling if people need it, that kind of thing. And also being open about it, talking about it. There's obviously a lot of stigma around mental health still, especially for men. It can be quite tricky to talk about. So really building mental health into this for everyone is really important as well. Okay, quick poll before we go on to building knowledge and skills. To what extent does your organization currently implement intergenerational programs to foster collaboration, understanding among employees of different age groups? Okay, so I can see that most people said limited or not at all. One person said extensively, one person said moderately, which is great. If you have the resources, intergenerational knowledge transfer is really, really important when it comes to engaging employees. So we'll just take a closer look at why. So for building knowledge and skills, encouraging intergenerational knowledge transfer is really key. So this is one of the best ways to transfer knowledge within a company. Most obviously, this is done through mentorship. So, for example, Google has multiple mentoring programs that encourage sharing knowledge across generations. They've got buddy programs where a new employee is paired with an older, more experienced employee. But also, it doesn't just stop at older employees teaching younger employees. It's not just more experienced employees that have knowledge that they can transfer to other people. So other organizations are sort of flipping the idea of mentoring on its head, and there's been increases in the number of mutual mentoring programs around the world. You might have also heard of something called reverse mentoring. This is kind of like that, except it's you mutually mentor each other. So one of these is at the University of Massachusetts. So mutual mentoring recognizes the fact that we all have knowledge that we can share, but we all have stuff that we can learn. We all have stuff that we're lacking as well. So it just encourages that transfer of knowledge. So at the University of Massachusetts, they offer general mutual mentoring, but also there can be mutual mentoring for specific situations or specific job titles. So they have a mutual mentoring group for people who also are working as carers outside of work, or they have a mutual mentoring group for people who are not tenured faculty members. And at their university, there's been a quicker career progression, more research output, more effective teaching, and improved socialization for the people that took part in those programs. So we can really, really see the value in it. Across the world, intergenerational programs, whether it's inside of work or outside of work, have resulted in improving self-worth for everyone involved, improving self-confidence. It reduces ageism as well, encourages more teaching and learning outside of formal programs and outside of your mentoring program, can develop social skills, and it also reduces stress and feelings of isolation. As we saw before, a lot of people don't feel comfortable in the workplace, they don't feel at home, they don't feel close with their co-workers. So this is a really great way to sort of combat that issue. Okay, so the next thing about building knowledge and skills is to make training accessible. 97% of employees want to learn more, and 94% would stay at company longer if training was provided. So this is really, really important. From the time that we start at company to literally the day that we leave, we need to be training, we need to be continuously learning. And one of the ways that we can do this is offering internal training programs for free. We have a higher level of participation and a sense of camaraderie and loyalty to the company. But also, if you could offer discounted training programs outside of your company, that would also really, really sort of increase the connection that you have with your employees. So one example I have written down is BT Group in the UK. When they put more effort into their employees' development and well-being, their retention rate increased a lot. And at one stage, 60% of all their board members had started at the company as apprentices and had just sort of trained and rose through the ranks. The next important thing to remember with training is to not split up age groups. So in some very specific cases, it can make sense to offer targeted training to one group. But generally, creating separate initiatives can be counterintuitive. It also just takes a lot more resources and it can make things feel even more isolated. So it's really important to not split up age groups and make sure that programs just work for everyone instead. Careful of ageism when it comes to training. So this is a quote from someone that works in a local government in the UK who said, if she's only going to do another couple of years anyway, what is the point of investing thousands of pounds of training? So we're not just looking at profitability for a company when it comes to training. We're looking at employee support. We're looking at employee satisfaction, motivation, morale. We know that people are retiring later as well. So this sort of viewpoint is becoming sort of more and more obscure because it doesn't make sense anymore. So yeah, just remember that everyone deserves training no matter how old or young they are. Then also consider people's other responsibilities and support them the best you can, because we all have lives outside of work. This might come from letting people take time off to further their studies, or it might come from letting people do training programs over longer periods of time because they might have caring responsibilities, that kind of thing. The next step in building knowledge is to not make it all about work. So if you have the resources, offering classes based around hobbies like art, music, cooking, and gardening can also be really helpful. we get a more well-rounded individual and a better work-life balance. But we also have more engaged employees and happier employees. So the other part of this is to not underestimate the development of skills that come from seemingly unrelated learnings. When people learn an instrument, for example, it's been proven to improve their sort of perseverance, their determination, but also completely seemingly unrelated things like learning an instrument can make you more adept at learning languages as well, or it can improve your mathematics skills. So all of this integrates, and it does make a better employee in the workplace, but also a happier, well-rounded employee in general. It's also important to offer classes based around life skills if there is a demand for it. A lot of basic life skills are really lacking, especially in the older population, when it comes to things like financial literacy. So if we can offer more holistic learning opportunities to our employees, that means that we'll get sort of more in return, we'll get more engagement, we'll get happier people, and happier people are generally more productive. The next part of building knowledge and skills is making it fun. So people who struggle in school, not just in terms of content, but also in terms of bullying, poor learning environments, are less likely to be open to training as an adult. So I've got this quote here from someone who's actually an HR representative talking about their own experience of training and why they didn't want to do any formal training because they had quite a bad experience at school because they were dyslexic. So to combat this, we need to change the idea of learning with edutainment, which is education that's entertaining. This applies to all age groups. There's a misconception that older adults don't want play in their learning, sort of meaningful play, this edutainment that sort of gets our brains going in a different way, but this isn't really true. It's not just limited to children. In America, 45% of people over the age of 50 engage in gaming activities. So it's happening, people are doing it anyway. Might as well do it and learn something for work at the same time. If we gamify learning, we'll see better results. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, if we gamify learning, we'll see better results. So not just in terms of gamifying like Duolingo, where we've got like competitions and that kind of thing, but we could also gamify our sort of tracking our learning progress. So this happened at Deloitte, the audit firm in the UK. People weren't completing their leadership training, but once they introduced badges, teams, and leaderboards into the training process, more employees took the training, and also the average time it took to complete the training was completely halved. So gamifying learning can be really, really valuable as well. The next part of building knowledge and skills is just monitoring and asking for feedback. This is kind of the same as ask, don't assume. People are more inclined to complete something when they're having fun with it. So testing for if people are enjoying the training is really, really important, because they are going to complete it and they're going to find it more useful. Another option or another way of doing this is inviting employees to collaborate in the actual planning and design of the programs before they're implemented. This is what they do at Toyota. So employees of any level are invited to give feedback on plans or current training programs. And once that feedback is heard, that employee is then invited to sort of help them change it to better it. And then, as I said, if people aren't engaging, just ask why and listen to them and understand why and change accordingly. The last part of building knowledge and skills is remembering that we don't have to learn to learn. So formal education isn't the only way we can build skills. Education doesn't happen in colleges and universities alone, happens in workplaces, communities, and all over. So there's so many different ways that skills are learned and developed. For example, volunteering, secondments, sort of job shadowing. There could be so many ways that people can learn skills for work. Giving employees trust and freedom to do their own projects also comes in under this. For example, Gmail was actually an employee's side project that they developed using 20% of their working time. So we can see results from that. We can see productivity when people have freedom to do their own projects. And then encourage volunteering. Volunteering builds so many skills, and also the network that can be then used in your job. But a lot of people are concerned that volunteering won't help them in work, so they might not find time to do it as well. So if we can encourage volunteering, not only does it help the cause, but also helps your company as well. Moving to skills-based hiring is the next really important thing. This is under addressing discrimination now. So 92% of American employers believe that skills-based hiring is more effective than hiring from resumes. Employees hired through skills-based assessments are also more likely to stay at companies for longer. And it encourages diversity in hiring across age and other factors too. So an example of this is Steelcase, which is a furniture manufacturer. And they changed their entire hiring process because they realized that they didn't have much diversity along the lines of gender or race. So where possible, they removed any requirements for previous work experience. They revamped job descriptions to remove biased language, and they prioritized skills over resumes. And as a result, employee retention and diversity both increased in the company. So yeah, change your job postings, your interview techniques, and your interview assessments, all to focus more on skills than concrete experience or prior work experience or resumes. The other part of this is to blind recruit. So you can use third-party vendors to filter job applications, and then not look at CVs. So you can only use sort of questions and assessments to pick your shortlist for your interviewees. And then with these third-party vendors, you can also keep everything anonymous until the interview. People can sort of get their interview invite on their email completely anonymous. So all of it can be anonymous literally until you see someone. Okay, quick poll break. In your opinion, which approach do you think is more effective in reducing ageism? Top down or bottom up? Or both? Okay, so again, a mixture, but most people have said both are equally important. I would agree. It depends on the situation a lot of the time, but they're both really, really important to use. When it does come to addressing discrimination, it is important to take a more bottom-up approach in some cases. Don't just run unconscious bias training. The evidence out there tells us that unconscious bias training alone doesn't really work. It doesn't have the intended results. Instead, hire diverse talent. This can be done through the blind recruiting that I just mentioned. Incorporate diversity, equality, and inclusion into your policies and goals. Create employee resource groups. This is quite an important way to hear employees' views and suggestions from the bottom up. Hold other people accountable as well. So if there are instances of discrimination, do something about it. That's really, really important. And then listen when people talk, evaluate and evolve. So after someone says something to you or after something happens, it's really important to sit back, think about it, and change accordingly. Adapting the workplace is also a really, really important step that we need to take. So we need to facilitate flexible working. we might be moving out of lockdown, going into the office more often, but that doesn't mean that we need to be in the office all the time. Flexible working is actually shown to improve productivity and increase employee engagement because they feel like there's that bit more freedom, or they feel like they're being listened to when they say, I need to work at home today. It improves job satisfaction as well and encourages better work-life balance. But it's not just working from home. So in the UK, we have flexible public holiday policies. This is where if you want to, you can trade a public holiday to work. Sorry. So if you want to on a public holiday, you can work and then trade that for a day of leave at a later time. This is also really useful for people who don't celebrate religious holidays, but the state has granted a public holiday for religious holidays. So for example, people that don't celebrate Christmas, they might not want to take the 25th of December off. They might, but they might not. And if they don't want to, they can use this flexible public holiday policy to change it to a day off that they actually do want. So that's a really important sort of policy that can also help attract more people and increase engagement as well. The last step is fostering a phased approach to retirement. So in the UK, only 31% of employees want to retire immediately, like one day working, one day nothing. So phased retirement is really important. It can improve mental health. It encourages a more active lifestyle within retirement, and just helps that transition and succession of knowledge also happen quite a lot easier. As I said earlier, knowledge transfer across generations is really, really important. So if we can use a phased approach to retirement, this can help that. Phased approaches can be done through mentoring programs or part-time work options, for example. One really important part of a phased approach to retirement is using a pension provider that can support phased retirement, where you can have sort of smaller payouts while you're still phasing out, and then it can change from there. And another important part of retirement is encouraging retiring employees to build community attachment skills. A lot of retirees struggle with loneliness because for the first time in 40 years, they're isolated and they aren't around people all the time. So encouraging employees that are retiring to build community attachment skills through volunteering or community clubs is really important. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi there, Anna. Thank you so much for this presentation and for walking us through all of these different aspects and categories when looking at an intergenerational workplace. So I will just remind everyone that you have a couple of different ways to connect with us. So if you're familiar with the chat function, you can pop those right into the chat. And if your preferred is question and answer, or there's a bit more anonymity and direct messaging, please feel free to do that. So as everyone begins typing their questions or thoughts, I'll kick things off with the first question here of just even how would you go about starting this conversation in your workplace, particularly if this isn't something that maybe has come up again of this need to engage in this intergenerational lens? How can you just even get that conversation going at the workplace?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose you could get it started by asking people what they might want differently, and not just in terms of intergenerational sort of interaction, but in terms of anything across the board and seeing what comes up from there. And if things do come up like more socialization, we saw that was a big issue, especially for younger workers, then we can go from there and think about how we can use intergenerational sort of techniques to help people answer people's questions and sort of bring it into the workplace a bit more.
Okay, great. Yes, that communication is always the thread, right? The common
Yeah.
thread that comes up again and again. So I know you've spoken about ageism, and that can kind of come from a variety of different lenses. Are there examples to look out for? So not maybe the large offenders, if you will, but just kind of those more like day-to-day things that you can see in your workplace to try and be a bit more aware of what's going on to then maybe move into action?
Yes, one big sort of microaggression of ageism is the idea that older adults can't use technology, which has actually been
Mm,
disproved time and time again. There's no evidence that the majority of older people can't use technology or can't learn in the same way as everyone else does when new technology comes out. So catching yourself if you have that kind of thought or say something like that. On the other side of it, thinking that younger people are less serious or less qualified to be in a position. I've personally experienced ageism, people saying, "Oh, I thought you would be so much older. How did you get this job?" Like,
mm.
so catching yourself with that as well, like at whatever age, just those little things. Yeah.
And then kind of in that follow-up, outside of the catching yourself, but is there things to help mitigate? So if you're in a situation and you're seeing this happening, what are maybe some things you can do in the moment to try and, divert or bring awareness that, actually maybe we shouldn't be speaking like this to each other, or is there fact in, those kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, I always think in the workplace it's of course better to be polite and sort of solve things with conflict resolution. So I think that for example, the tech example, if you do see someone saying, "Oh, older people can't use computers," or that person probably needs help because they don't know how to use computers, it might just be useful to shut it down by saying, actually, I think they look like they're doing okay, or if you think they need help, why don't you go ask them instead of standing here and talking about it? So just a small comment that can sort of dilute the situation, take attention away, and maybe educate someone in the process as well.
Great, thank you. When it comes to implementing these kinds of intergenerational programs, are there particular challenges or resistances that have come across in your research to be aware of when you're starting this? You're doing the get started, but when it comes to implementing, are there any kind of challenges or resistances to be aware of and try and kind of get ahead of, perhaps?
Yeah, there's not that many to be honest, but the one that I can think of is there's quite a big challenge with older people's confidence when it comes to learning, especially, or upskilling and retraining. And a lot of people feel that they might be too old to learn. So they have that sort of internalized ageism about learning. So that might be a challenge in implementation. And yeah, with mitigating, it's tricky because it does depend on the person and how they would respond to certain sort of encouragements or techniques. But just reassuring people that they're not too old to learn, they can do it, they should do it, it's going to benefit them. And I think part of that is offering those sort of fun classes as well,
Yes.
cooking, gardening, etc., etc. And yeah, showing people that learning doesn't have to be just work, doesn't have to be scary, can be fun, can be a hobby, and they can do it. They're doing it fine already.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to highlight as well, that sometimes it's not even external challenges or things, it's
Yeah.
actually those internal ones. And I think that's really important to highlight, to be aware of both. Looking at a question, just speaking of the making learning fun kind of side of things and this edutainment that you commented. So it's a new concept to me from the question. So how would you straddle this line of engaging fun and perhaps getting more into the like cheesy? Now it's starting to maybe not feel so, um, I guess not that engaging. It's kind of moved into the line of kind of cheesy or childish.
Yeah, I think don't push it. I think the competitive thing is quite a good angle to take. A lot of us, I mean, I know there's some people that just naturally aren't competitive, but a lot of people are. And also, if you already have a good relationship with your co-workers, that sort of fun of getting to compete with them and sort of challenge can be really, really helpful, exciting. It can make it more entertaining. Um, yeah, I would say stay away from anything too cheesy. Um, yeah, yeah, because it can feel a bit patronizing sometimes.
Yeah, and perhaps it's also, as you mentioned quite a lot as well, of just asking if it's not engaging, why isn't it?
Yeah,
And maybe that's the reason. And you just kind of need to have that open dialogue and evaluation. Um,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, something that you mentioned at the beginning that we have a question around is the perception, right? These perceptions of maybe not a shared value system or these differences from an intergenerational perspective. So, how do you kind of handle that where to try and really like highlight or bring light to that it is actually more perception and there is a lot more commonalities or shared values than people might have in their head? Can you speak to kind of bringing light to that?
Yeah, I would say that intergenerational sort of mutual mentoring programs are really key for that.
Hmm.
If we can spend more time with someone and talk to them more and not just about whatever meeting is happening that day, we can see that they're not what we perceive them to be. We can see that they're not what our sort of first snap judgment of them was. And then we can slowly start to unravel. And that's why intergenerational programs have been directly proven to reduce ageism on both sides because we get to know a person better. So yeah, I'd say literally just like building a team and spending more time together is the way to combat that.
Okay, fantastic. And we're actually coming to time, so I'll just end with a final question then. Well, I'll cheat and do two because there's one really quick follow-up to that. Have you found a difference in engagement when the mentorship programs are volunteer versus a mandatory setup?
I can only speak from quite limited experience. There is some difference in engagement, but once mentorships are set up, if generally if people like each other and if people enjoy it, even if it's mandatory, they'll carry on doing it. So sometimes you do need to force people into it a little bit and
Okay.
they'll have fun.
And just staying in the line of that team building, and again, this will be the final question today. When you're thinking of team building and bringing perhaps an intergeneration or generational lens, how do you balance what might be impactful from a team building perspective for different generations, as different generations might find different activities more impactful than the other? So how do you kind of bring that into the fold so that the team building activity is feeling impactful for everyone there?
I think not to come back to it again, but I think asking, even if you have an option of like three different activities and seeing which one people want to do
Mm.
most, and often we can bridge our interests across
Mhm.
generations. We can find something that we all want to do in terms of a team building activity, even if it is as simple as like going to the pub for like an informal team building or team lunch kind of thing. So asking and implementing from there, I would say.
Okay, great. And perhaps maybe something that we did today, a quick poll, is all that it takes to capture everybody's
Yeah,
interest.
exactly.
Continue to learn and connect with the Work Wellness Institute and see how we're transforming research into workplace performance and health at www.workwellnessinstitute.org.